Oh dear, Sir Keir Starmer's political bounce from his trip to the United States has been shorter than Tom Cruise's 501s, with the shock news that his International Aid Minister Annalisa Dodds has sensationally quit the government over the Prime Minister's plans to slash the foreign aid budget. In her resignation letter, she said pulling back from international development would bolster Russia and China in their geopolitical ambitions. Like that isn't happening already. How does Britain helping with India's space program or teaching Kenyans about gender diversity possibly stop Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping from pursuing global domination? The quality of Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet is now so low that this is the first time in history where a resignation is actually welcome news. It's an upgrade, because this resignation sees the departure of a radical lefty in Dodds who backed gender self-ID, which means that you can basically decide whether you're a boy or a girl today, depending on what the weather's like and what mood you were in when you woke up. But biology is not the only issue in which she is in denial. The basic laws of economics seem to have eluded her as well, with her recommendation of socialist regulation of the financial system in order to end inequality. Now, this is the financial services sector, one of the few profitable bits of this country, but she wants to take that down as well. At which point, we'll all be living in mud huts and selling our offspring to the highest bidder just to keep the lights on. She wants to expand the welfare state with more handouts for those who don't work, paid for by those who do. It seems to have escaped her attention that Britain is running a deficit at the moment, with more going out than coming in. So, if you should be doing anything with the welfare state, it is actually cut, cut, cut. But these are the kind of people that Starmer thinks are best suited to lead this government. Be afraid, be very afraid. And she's all in with net zero, like they all are, endlessly shrieking about the climate emergency. Now, not many people are denying that we are screwing up the planet and temperatures are rising. But it's also worth noting that the UK is responsible for some of the lowest emissions, 1%. And a huge chunk of our energy is already renewable. Meanwhile, China, India, Brazil and the US are burning fossil fuels for fun. But people like Annalisa Dodds would like to see Britain bankrupt itself and become a basic third world country in order to feel like we're doing our bit for the planet and to please our friends at echo chamber North London dinner parties, where woke progressives like Dodds can signal their virtue, comfortable in the knowledge that they can afford the worst excesses of net zero, unlike ordinary people struggling with the cost of living and high energy bills, which are to a huge extent brought about because of our lack of energy independence and our refusal to drill, baby, drill. Dodds is a green radical, having previously suggested that we consider banning domestic flights, take fewer trips in cars, and that old chestnut, eat less meat. Now, I'm all for sensible measures to clean up the environment, but this is communism by the back door from someone who was a key part of Keir Starmer's new government. So her departure may be an improvement to the cabinet, but it's a reminder that these are the people running the country now, and they all think like her. She wasn't even fired for her radical bonkers ideas. She's the one who quit. You couldn't make it up. Unfortunately, Dodds will be replaced by another radical leftist because they're all cut from the same cloth. And anyone fooled by Sir Keir Starmer's trip to the United States needs to have a think about themselves. There he was in Washington, sucking up to Donald Trump and pretending to be a fan of free speech, capitalism and prosperity. Starmer is just a liar. He's a fake. And he spent his 24 hours in the United States delivering an Oscar-worthy performance as a pro-freedom Western leader. Do me a favour. Now, Donald Trump could easily be forgiven for not realising the truth that Starmer is more of a Soviet figure, locking people up for being unkind on Facebook, labelling those concerned about the consequences of mass immigration as political extremists, and crippling our once dynamic and successful economy with an egregious tax raid on businesses, not to mention a blizzard of anti-capitalist red tape, a vicious assault on our pensioners, and the needless and cruel war on those hard-working people who produce our food in all weathers, the farmers. Donald Trump supports his farmers whilst our Prime Minister throws them under the combine harvester. Just to give you a sense of how these Labour politicians think, when the outgoing Annalisa Dodds considers how defence spending might increase if it doesn't come from the aid budget, She talks about looking at our fiscal rules and taxation. Now, the taxation is not a surprise. Labour haven't noticed that the taxes are now at the highest level since the Second World War. And with their policies having killed economic growth from being number one in the G7 last July under the Tories to 0.1% now and an effective recession, they want more of these economy-damaging measures. She's suggesting going further with a policy which has destroyed our national income. And these are the folks in charge. Utterly terrifying. But perhaps even worse than this talk of tax is the idea of changing the fiscal rules. Do you know what that means? That is a creepy Labour doublespeak for yet more borrowing, even though the national debt is well over 2 trillion and the cost of servicing our debt is larger than most government departments. It's £100 billion a year on interest alone before we've paid back a penny. Just to give you some perspective, our defence budget is 60 billion. So we're paying almost double that for nothing except the price of our previous profligacy, and Labour want more. More tax, more borrowing. Welcome to the Labour mindset, which is why I sometimes fear this country will not survive the next 4 years of this wicked, dishonest and incompetent government. Which is why I wanted to throw up into my cornflakes this morning when I saw the press fawning over Keir Starmer's performance in the White House. Well, that's exactly what it was. It was a performance from a man dishonest to his core, a lying charlatan whose duplicity exists on a cellular level. How dare he insult the heroic Vice President J.D. Vance by claiming that Britain is still the home of free speech, when Vance quite rightly pointed out, with a number of examples, just how illiberal this country has become. In Munich, he pointed out that Britain is turning into a police state, with one of the country's most high-profile journalists even, Alison Pearson, threatened with prosecution for a tweet. Keir Starmer isn't fit to lace J.D. Vance's shoes, a man who came from grinding poverty and an abusive domestic setting to become an Ivy League graduate, a top lawyer, and now number 2 in the Oval Office. Starmer is a number 2 as well, but a very different kind. Isn't it ironic that Britain might escape Donald Trump's tariffs and win an historic trade deal thanks to Brexit, something that Starmer campaigned vociferously against whilst in opposition, seeking to reverse a public mandate? Because he doesn't believe in free speech and he doesn't believe in democracy either. Which is why Starmer and his cronies cannot seriously pretend to be true friends of America or share the vision of that great country under fearless new leadership. A country which stands for free enterprise, free speech and aspiration. We've got the total opposite here. Crushing energy prices and an insecure supply thanks to the ideology of net zero. Eye-watering taxes. 12,000 millionaires leaving the country in a single year. And billionaires escaping on their private jets. We have low growth, low productivity, a vast dependent welfare state, an expensive, unaccountable and failing public sector, open borders, crime on the streets, pensioners shivering in their homes, farmers robbed blind. And even on a geopolitical level, we are a joke. With the Chagos Islands giveaway, right? The £18 billion worth of which will likely come from Keir Starmer's pretend boost to defence spending, in a clear example of cooking the books and misleading the public. By the time inflation is taken into account and other fiscal loopholes, it could be that our defence spending in real terms winds up the same or even less. Welcome to Labour. Boosting defence by reducing it, growing the economy by shrinking it, controlling our borders by opening them. Socialist Keir Starmer is no friend of the United States, and he's no friend of Britain either.